The other thing that we end up seeing the most of is plane type travel. Wanting to get a pet cleared to be able to travel through air, especially avoiding being in a cargo hold.
Hey y'all, welcome to Buddies Besties. I'm Layla, I'm your host today. And today I am with Tori Garcia. You are a licensed vet tech.
Yes.
And we are gonna talk all things travel, which is a really interesting topic for me because I see all these animals on social media traveling everywhere and I can't get my cats to even go to the vet. So I would love to just start by talking about what different kinds of travel are open to your pets. What kind of different things can you do with your animal?
Most common types is people wanting to travel in their own vehicles to and from different states, especially wanting to go hiking or mountain climbing, things like that. The other thing that we end up seeing the most of is plane type travel. Wanting to get a pet cleared to be able to travel through air, especially avoiding being in a cargo hold and actually having your pet with you in the person's cabin.
Okay, so let's talk about car travel. What types of trips would you be able to take your animals on, and what are some things you can do to prep them to be able to take, let's just say it's a long trip.
Yeah.
3, 4, 5, 10-hour maybe drive. What are some things they can do with their pets to get them ready for that and make it a more successful trip?
Well, having traveled a 10-hour road trip with my 2 dogs at the time, we now have 3, but there's a lot that you can do ahead of time in order to prepare. Usually small car trips at a time. We're going to get in the car. We're going to go get a pup cup at Starbucks. We're going to go get some ice cream at Brahms. We're going to go do something fun, something enjoyable, something that makes the experience really positive, really uplifting for the pet. So we're cementing an emotionally positive association with getting into the car.
Okay.
The other thing that I would do is train some sort of a rest or still pose at home on a blanket or a towel, and then transfer that to the car while you're traveling.
The same blanket.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So you have an association of, if I'm on this blanket, if I'm on this towel, I'm supposed to be calm. We're just relaxing. Everything's going fine at home. We transfer that to the car. And that way we have some sort of a transfer of the idea of, we're just here to chill.
Okay, we're just going to chill.
We're just going to chill.
It's just in a different spot.
Mm-hmm.
What about with a cat?
Cats are always a little bit more difficult. Most cats don't like being in their carrier in the car.
Oh, that's interesting because I've heard to keep them in the carrier.
You actually are supposed to. It's
Okay.
most recommended. That way they don't accidentally get caught underneath seats.
Yes.
Or they don't accidentally get caught somewhere in the luggage in the back, and now you can't find them.
Right.
So usually what we recommend is you keep your carrier out in your house or in your apartment, and you decorate it seasonally.
Okay.
And you throw in some treats every now and then, and you throw in some of their favorite toys so that the carrier becomes a normal part of their environment. And that way, when we have to actually get into the carrier for traveling, whether it's to a veterinary clinic or whether it's just on a vacation, the carrier itself already is associated with feeling like home. And that way, the stress doesn't start until we get out of the carrier.
So we're leaving them in the carrier in the car, though, even though they don't prefer it. I learned it the hard way. So I was moving.
Oh, no.
I was moving. I was in the U-Haul. I had one of my cats, and I unzipped the carrier because he was crying, and he ran under the U-Haul seat, and then I couldn't get out of the U-Haul till I found him, and it was a very, very interesting trip.
Had to fetch many a cat from underneath the car.
What about feeding them during that time? So it's 10 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Me as a cat mom, I want to always make sure that they're hydrated and they're fed. And so I wonder and worry, should I be feeding them on the trip? Do we wait until we get there and then feed?
We always recommend there needs to be some sort of break every 4 hours within a car travel.
Okay.
And during that time, if you are going to go ahead and feed, do not feed while you are actually in a moving vehicle. It's going to increase your chances of car sickness exponentially.
Okay.
And so once we have eaten, usually we recommend about a 30-minute break, kind of like before you go swimming.
Okay.
30-minute break.
Good rule of thumb.
Before you actually get back into the car and then restart all of your travel.
And what's the most you would say you should be in a car with an animal? I know 4 hours at a time, but is that twice, in like 8 hours?
It actually is pretty pet dependent.
Okay.
So if the dog or the cat or the bird or whatever it is you're traveling with handles travel pretty well. So personally, my babies, I got them both when I was in college. It was an 8-hour car ride to and from home in order to go to college. So they got very used to very long car rides pretty quickly.
Okay.
So if they're used to longer car rides, then you can have pretty extended times of travel. Whereas if you have a pet that's never been in a car for longer than a couple of hours at a time or longer than an hour at a time, I would recommend much more frequent breaks and probably no more than 2 to 3 traveling segments before we have some sort of a stillness.
Okay. How about when they're going to fly? Let's just say you're going to fly with your animals. So that's a really big, people are doing it. It's challenging. There's been a lot in the news around things that can happen with your pet when you fly. There's a lot of different and confusing regulation on the carriers. And I know when I did it, I flew with one of my cats. I tried to buy a seat for him and they wouldn't let me do that. So it was very challenging because I thought, well, I'll just do the easy thing and I'll get him his own seat.
Yeah.
That did not work. So we had to figure out a way to put him under the seat. So what are some things that people can ask and do to prepare for flying with their animals?
So unfortunately, most people who typically work for phone answering services for airlines are not familiar with the requirements that airline has for pet travel.
Okay.
So I would call at least 3 or 4 times. You're probably going to get a different answer almost every time. Also go by what they have listed online. Because if you can print that out and they say, you're not meeting requirements, and you go, well, these are the requirements that you have listed and we're meeting all of those, a lot of times they'll be able to accommodate at that point.
Okay.
So only service animals are actually allowed to purchase a secondary seat.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Did not know that.
Yeah.
So if you have a service animal and they're a large service animal, you can actually buy a seat.
You can purchase a seat for them.
All right.
So, however, a lot of airlines have a stipulation that if that seat is desired by a paying client for a person, it will go to the person rather than the service animal.
Even if you pay for it?
Even if you've already paid for it.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. What about putting them under the seat in front of you, which is how most of us have to travel? Is that safe? Are they comfortable? How should we think about when we're flying?
Yeah, flying no matter what for a pet is going to be a stressful experience. You know, most pets obviously are not designed to be in the air.
Yeah, unless they're a bird.
Exactly. There's pressure changes that go on during takeoff and landing. There's commotion going on. There are strange sights, strange smells. So usually if you're doing a shorter flight that's inside the United States or inside your nation, we usually recommend some sort of medication to help cope with the changes. Nothing crazy. We don't want them drooling on the floor of the airplane.
Right.
But something that's going to help them cope with the changes. However, if you're flying internationally or if your pet is in the cargo hold, they actually require the pet not be medicated because certain pets will respond to certain medications in stressful environments differently, and the airline doesn't want to be responsible if your pet has an adverse reaction to their sedation medication while flying.
Let's talk a little bit about international, because we were having a bit of a conversation before the camera started rolling, which I found to be interesting. But let's talk about flying with your animal international. What kind of documentation do you need if you're going to go to Europe, as an example?
So if you're going to go to, honestly, Europe, Africa, China, any of those places, you have to have a health certificate that is signed by a veterinarian who's evaluated your pet within 10 days of the flight.
Okay.
You also have to have a current rabies vaccination, a current distemper parvo vaccination, and you have to be able to have that all documented. And current meaning that if your pet normally gets a 3-year vaccine, which is available, it doesn't count.
Oh.
It has to be done annually for it to count in other countries.
Well, that's really good for our viewers to know, because you think, hey, they've got their rabies, I'm good.
Yeah.
Do we need that when we go on a domestic flight? Do we need all of those things? Do we need a health certificate?
We do recommend that you have a health certificate.
Okay.
Most airlines, if you're flying, won't actually ask for it.
Okay.
However, if they ask for it and you don't have one, now you'll be denied flight.
Okay. Let's go back to international then. So we're flying international with our animals. Some of these flights can be 20 hours. What are some of the things that we should be thinking about when we're doing a long flight like that?
It does depend on if your pet's going to be with you in the passenger compartment or in cargo hold. Usually, if your pet is going to be in a longer flight in cargo hold, they do recommend highly that you have some sort of connecting flight where you stay a day kind of halfway between your two destinations to allow your pet to have time outside of their carrier, to be able to have time to eat, drink, kind of cope with their changing environment a little bit before going right back into it. So usually with dogs, there are requirements for a hard plastic crate that has a certain number of holes for air around the sides of it and has a certain locking mechanism on the front of the cage so that the pet can't get out. So, and usually with cats, if they're going to go into cargo, they do recommend a hard carrier just because it is at that point easier to stack things. However, if you're going to be in the passenger compartment, we do recommend a soft carrier. So that way, if it needs to kind of squish down a little bit to fit under a seat during takeoff or landing, it can.
We were talking a little bit, and we're going to talk about hotels because that's a really hot topic for me. But I want to talk a little bit about the new regulations in Europe that we were talking about, which is
the
kind
bully
of
breed banning.
So it's kind of travel related if you're thinking about taking your pet, but it's also just kind of an interesting topic to bring up. So can you just tell us a little bit about the Europe regulations that are coming about?
Well, recently, within the last couple of months, there have been quite a few laws that have been passed in Europe that fully ban bully breeds.
So can you tell us what a bully breed is for those of us that don't know?
Bully breeds meaning American Pit Bull Terriers, meaning Mastiffs, Cane Corsos, Presa Canarios, American Bulldogs, even some breeds of Frenchies or cross mixes with any of those. So basically, the new law states that you cannot sell, trade, adopt out, or purchase a bully breed within Europe. Which has been incredibly traumatic for a lot of bully breed owners because now they've kind of been given an ultimatum. Either their dog has to get certified as an approved bully within a certain area, and there are certain numbers of approved bullies that can live within a certain area, or you have to euthanize your own pet.
So, that's a lot. So what does that mean if you're, let's just say you're traveling and you have one of these animals and you want to bring them with you?
Fortunately, you're not going to Europe.
You're not. You just can't bring them.
Nope.
So, and that's effective now? Is it still something they're legislating? Is it actually passed?
It actually passed last month.
Passed. So if you have a bulldog and you want to go to Europe and you want to bring them, you can't do that?
Nope, not at all.
Okay. So good to know. And I'm going to assume that you know that before you go. I mean, is there a scenario where you could get on a plane and have your animal with you and then you get there and they turn you away?
Thankfully, now that the legislation is actually passed and people are becoming much more aware of it, it's out there. People are saying if you purchase a European flight, usually they're pretty good about saying, hey, if you can't bring these breeds, you know, all that stuff. There were a few circumstances where there were people who were actually in flight to Europe when the legislation passed and landed
and turned back
and
around
had to turn right around.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So we'll keep our eye on that. So let's assume that you get to your destination and you've got to set up a hotel. Tell me a little bit about what we should be looking for as pet parents when we're looking for a hotel.
One of the things I'm always concerned about is if a hotel says all pets available, all pets welcome, that's almost a red flag for me. Because at that point, I don't know who's bringing what into the hotel, and I have to consider the safety of my own pets first. And so we could have people that are coming in, and if they don't state anywhere in their guidelines, dogs must be on leash, cats must be in carriers, there could be an unfriendly dog off leash in that hotel somewhere, and I would then be held liable rather than the hotel. However, most hotels do have pretty strict regulations on what is and is not allowed, and it is per actual corporate office. So they all make their own rules.
I have noticed that cats are not welcome in many hotels. Can you talk a little bit about why that is, and then what do we do as cat owners?
Well, unfortunately, they strongly believe that cats are going to cause quite a bit more damage than dogs will, mostly because of scratching everything. So usually if you actually call and then say, hey, we'll keep our cat confined to a bathroom, or we'll keep our cat in their very large, spacious carrier, a lot of hotels will actually accommodate.
Okay.
So unfortunately, there are quite a few that are very strict about what can and cannot come in, including size regulations.
So that's the best thing we can do then is prepare. So if you're driving cross country, you want to pick where you're going to stop and make
way
those
before you
reservations
leave.
and be ready to go.
Way before you leave.
Any other call outs on hotels that we should think about with either traveling with cats or dogs? And what if you're traveling with not a cat, not a dog? What if you're traveling with a reptile or a bird? Or are those things listed?
There actually aren't any regulations that prevent exotic type pets from traveling with people and being admitted into hotel rooms. The hotel itself at that point, you would then have to call, say, hey, I'm traveling with my African gray, or I'm traveling with my sand boa, and I would like to know what your regulations for that are. At that point, the employee is going to go, I don't know. Let me go ask.
Right. Okay.
So,
wow. Is there anything you can do when you're traveling? I'm going to go back to the plane for a second.
Yeah.
Is there anything you can do when you're traveling with your pet to keep them out of the cargo?
So there actually are size requirements.
Okay.
So usually if a dog is over 30 pounds, they are not going to be allowed in the passenger hold. So if they're over 30 pounds, unfortunately, unless they are a service animal, you're a little bit out of luck.
Okay.
If they're under 30 pounds, there are requirements for types of harnesses, types of leashes, and where they can actually stay while they're within the passenger hold of the plane.
Are there any special leashes, harnesses, things like that you should get your cats or dogs used to before you travel that are better for travel? Or is it the same leash or harness that I walk my dog with is the same one? It's the same one.
Well, the number one thing that you need to be aware of is regardless of whether it's the same one you use at home or whether it's something new that you're going to purchase, that dog or that cat cannot be able to wiggle out of it.
Okay.
So if your dog can pop their head right out of their collar if they pull back, you don't want that. If your cat can wiggle their way right out of that harness, it's not going to be good for you.
When you're traveling with a cat and they're in the carrier, do you suggest having the harness on them while they're in the carrier? Yeah, so don't take it off.
Don't take
so
it off.
More comfortable.
Yep.
No.
Some cats are a little bit smarter than others. If they happen to know how to get their carrier open,
yes,
and that harness is not on, and your cat has a loud noise, scary something happens, they're just kind of freaking out, having a panic moment, and they take off. Now you're trying to get a cat out of underneath a plane seat instead of a car seat.
Right. Very difficult. I did travel with my cat, and he actually was way better than I expected, but you have to take him out to go through TSA,
yes,
which I was not prepared for. So that was a new thing. He did have a harness, but my cats don't go out and we don't walk them and things like that. And so putting the harness on him, I did try and prep him for that and teach him, but it was not comfortable. And when I took him out, I thought, oh, for sure he's going to run, and I'm glad I have this harness. But he clung to Mama because he didn't know what was happening. We got through the TSA, but I thought you could put the carrier, like you could walk the carrier through the TSA. No, they have to come out. So I thought that was an interesting thing I was not prepared for, and I thought I was pretty prepared.
Thankfully, most pets at that point just kind of go, Mama, save me.
Yes, he was definitely doing that. He was definitely doing that. So we talked a little bit about medications that'll prep them. Mm-hmm. Do those all have to come from the vet? Are there things that are over the counter that we can give them that, like, maybe there's chews and there's the feel away and there's lots of things I know for cats, but I don't know if there's similar things for dogs that maybe you can just get on your own.
So there is actually, so those of you that don't know, Feel Away is a pheromone spray that is used in cats. That is actually something that mother cats emit to calm litters of kittens, which is why we use it for behavioral therapy to help cats realize they're in a safe place. And dogs actually have a very similar product called Adaptil.
Oh.
And so there is that same hormone, pheromone therapy for dogs that we use with cats.
I'm learning so much. I love it.
So there are, different chews, calming chews, things like that are available. However, there's going to be a difference of what pet responds to what.
Okay.
My 15-year-old lab, he takes a milk protein during thunderstorms, and he is calm as a kitten in the middle of a warm blanket.
Wow.
I mean, it just does wonders. Now, if I give that same milk protein to my Malinois Husky mix, she goes, "Oh, thanks for the snack, Mom. Let me bounce off the walls."
So totally different reaction.
So test all of these before you go onto a flight, and that way you know if there is something that actually works for your pet before getting into a scary situation. And that way, if you don't find anything over the counter that does work, you can then work with your veterinarian on finding a medication combination that does work for your pet.
Are there any myths or old wives' tales that you've heard about traveling with pets that do or don't work?
Oh, yes. Benadryl does not make your dog drowsy.
That's a good one.
They do not metabolize it the same way that people do.
Okay.
They do. It does not make your dog drowsy by any means.
It's not going to help you.
No, not at all.
Okay. That's a good one. I've heard the medication is the same for animals as it is for people, and I've also heard it's not, right? So yes, so Benadryl is not going to make them tired.
No, Benadryl is not going to make them tired.
It just makes me tired and probably you tired.
Yeah.
I've seen these animals online that are really like super travelers. So there's this little kitty that I follow. His name is Dobby.
Yes.
And do you know who Dobby is?
Yes, I do.
I love that you know who Dobby is. He has like a little life vest, and he's on a boat. And that cat is amazing. And I am telling you,
he loves the world.
He loves the world and he loves water. And I can't get mine anywhere near it. So is some of the travel really dependent on the animal and what they'll tolerate? And
so much, yes. And usually it's dependent on personality type as well as breed type. Certain breeds are going to have dispositions for certain things as well as age.
Okay.
So if I were wanting to fly with any of mine, my 15-year-old lab is not going to handle being in a plane well. The pressure changes on his old bones are going to ache. They're going to hurt. He's going to have a lot more trouble traveling than, say, my 4-year-old Husky Malinois or my 8-year-old Corgi mix.
Okay. So breed, age, size, all matters. All matters.
Yeah, and thankfully, whatever veterinarian you usually see, as long as they do health certificates, should be knowledgeable about most of this and will be able to help figure out what exactly is going to work best for you and your family.
So would you say the most important thing you can do when you're getting ready to travel with your pet is to talk to your vet or your vet tech and ask?
Honestly, I would.
What is the best way to do this?
Yeah.
I love that. Well, you've given us lots of tips and tricks. I think that there's lots of folks taking short car rides and trips, and this has been really helpful. I really appreciate you spending some time with me today.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. It was wonderful to be here.
Thanks so much, Tori. Thanks for joining us today, and join us next time for the next episode of Buddies Besties. And remember, adopt, don't shop.